Congresswoman Omar, in the hypothetical event that the United States and Somalia were to engage in armed conflict tomorrow, which side would you wish to see victorious? The inquiry suspended itself in the atmosphere, heavy and palpable, resembling the lingering smoke from a freshly discharged weapon. Senator John Kennedy's Louisiana drawl rendered the query almost conversational, as if he were merely inquiring about the daily weather forecast. However, every individual present within the Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing room understood that this was the decisive moment. It was the culmination of 90 minutes of methodical, devastating interrogation. A complete silence descended, the variety of silence that possesses physical weight, pressing against one's chest and making one acutely aware of their own respiration. Ilhan Omar sat at the witness table, positioned between three attorneys clad in expensive suits. She had entered the room 2 hours prior, exuding confidence, perhaps even a sense of defiance. She had weathered attacks from the opposing party before. She had faced accusations regarding her allegiance, investigations into campaign finance, and heated rhetoric. In the past, she always emerged stronger, more celebrated by her supporters, and more adept at utilizing the controversy for fundraising. Yet, this situation was distinct. This was not a partisan skirmish. It was a straightforward inquiry presenting a binary choice: America or Somalia, and she found herself unable to answer it. 10 seconds of silence stretched into 15, and 15 soon became 20. The C-SPAN cameras remained fixed tightly upon her visage. Every cable news network had interrupted regular programming to broadcast this moment live. Millions of viewers were watching, waiting. "That is a ridiculous hypothetical," she finally stated, her voice carrying the defensive edge that appeared whenever she felt cornered. Kennedy did not raise his voice. There was no need. "It is a simple question, ma'am. Every American citizen should possess the ability to answer it in a single second. Which side would you want to win?" Another pause ensued. One could observe her calculating, the gears turning behind her eyes, for there was no favorable response available. To say America would contradict everything she had communicated to Somali American audiences for years regarding their homeland and their people. To say Somalia would effectively end her career on national television, to say neither would imply an answer that everyone already understood. "I refuse to engage with hypotheticals designed to question my loyalty." She deflected. Kennedy held up a hand, his tone remaining gentle, almost kind, which somehow made the interrogation more piercing. "I have not mentioned your religion once, ma'am. Not once in 2 hours. I have inquired about your allegiance to nations, not your faith. I have asked which country you would choose if forced to make a selection, America or Somalia. That is not a matter of Islam, that is a matter of loyalty." He retrieved a document from the stack arranged before him. "Because we possess recordings of you telling Somali American audiences that our homeland is being attacked by America. You have stated that our people back home require our assistance. You have referred to Somalia as home in the present tense 43 times over the past 5 years. Therefore, I am asking, when you say home, which country are you referencing?" "I can possess a complex identity," she replied. "You may possess any identity you wish, ma'am. You can take pride in your heritage. You can love Somali culture. However, you can only maintain one political allegiance in the United States Congress. You swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States, not the Somali Constitution, not both. 1. So, for the final time, if America and Somalia went to war, which side would you want to win?" 25 seconds of silence passed. Then 30, the longest silence in the history of modern congressional hearings. Then an occurrence took place that nobody had anticipated. An individual in the audience stood up from row 8, on the left side. A Somali-American woman dressed in a black hijab and a professional suit. "Just say America, Ilhan." Her voice was clear, cutting through the silence like a knife. "Why can't you simply say America?" Omar turned to look at her, shock registering on her face. This was supposed to be friendly territory. The audience was filled with Somali Americans, progressive activists, and people who had supported her. The woman's voice grew stronger. "My family chose this country. We fled Somalia because it failed us. We came here. We took the oath of citizenship, and we meant it. We said, America is our home now, not Somalia. America. Why can't you say the same thing?" Omar opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked to her lawyers, but they were staring at their notes, unable to assist. She looked back at Kennedy. He was waiting, patient, wearing a slight, sad smile, as if he already knew how this scenario would conclude. Then Ilhan Omar stood up. She gathered her papers with shaking hands and looked at the chairman of the committee. "I am not going to sit here and participate in this discriminatory spectacle." Kennedy's voice stopped her, still calm, maintaining that drawl. "Congresswoman, you are still under oath. You cannot simply depart. Watch me." She was moving now, her lawyers scrambling to gather their materials and follow. "Ma'am, if you walk out without answering, everyone watching will know exactly what your silence signifies." She stopped at the door and turned. Her voice was shaking with anger or fear, or perhaps both. "My answer is that I do not owe you or anyone else proof of my loyalty. I took the oath of citizenship. I took the oath of office. That should be sufficient." Kennedy leaned back in his chair. "The oath of citizenship includes renouncing allegiance to all foreign countries, specifically renouncing it. But you have not renounced allegiance to Somalia, have you? You still call it home. You still call Somalis our people. You still vote in favor of Somali government interests over American interests. The oath is not enough if you do not honor it." Omar did not respond. She pushed through the door and was gone. The hearing room erupted, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, senators arguing, but Kennedy sat calmly, organizing his papers into neat stacks as if he had just finished a routine committee meeting, rather than having just dismantled a congresswoman's career on live television. To understand how we arrived at this moment, how a refugee success story transformed into a question of divided loyalty, one must return to 90 minutes earlier, when Ilhan Omar walked into that hearing room believing she could survive this, just as she had survived everything else. It was Tuesday morning, February 3rd, 2026. The Senate Hart Office Building, Room 419. The Foreign Relations Committee hearing room was filling with reporters, cameras, and staffers. The atmosphere was electric. Everyone knew this event would be significant. The hearing had been convened following a ProPublica investigation 3 weeks earlier. The headline had been stark: Congresswoman's Secret Coordination. How Ilhan Omar's office worked with Somali government to influence U.S. policy. The investigation had been devastating. Phone records revealed calls between Omar's office and Somali government officials. Emails demonstrated coordinated messaging. Meeting logs that had not been properly disclosed surfaced, and financial records showed hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing from sources connected to the Somali government into Omar's campaign and her husband's business. The pattern was undeniable. Omar would receive a classified briefing about Somalia, and within 48 hours, she would meet with or call Somali government officials. Subsequently, she would vote or make statements that aligned perfectly with Somali government interests, even when those interests conflicted with stated U.S. policy. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee had voted to hold oversight hearings and they had subpoenaed Ilhan Omar to testify under oath. At 9:45 a.m., she arrived. Ilhan Omar was 43 years old. She had come to America as a 12-year-old refugee from Somalia, spent 4 years in a Kenyan refugee camp, learned English, became a citizen, worked as a community organizer, and then shocked the political world by winning a House seat in 2016. She had been re-elected 3 times. She was a member of the Squad, the group of progressive congresswomen who had become celebrities on the left and villains on the right. She had built her career on being attacked and surviving. Every controversy made her more famous, and every attack from the opposition became a fundraising email. She had learned to turn opposition into fuel. She entered the hearing room wearing a bright purple hijab with a matching suit, professional, confident. 3 lawyers flanked her, 2 from a major D.C. firm, and 1 Somali-American civil rights attorney present for optics. Her communications team sat in the audience, ready to live tweet and spin whatever transpired. Omar took her seat at the witness table, arranged her papers, whispered to her lawyers, and looked out at the cameras with that slight, defiant smile she had perfected. This was just another attack she had to handle. She had handled worse. What Ilhan Omar did not know was that John Kennedy had spent 6 weeks preparing for this moment. He had not just focused on the policy violations or the financial improprieties, though those were damning enough, but on something deeper, something that could not be spun, defended, or explained away. 6 weeks earlier, in Kennedy's office in the Russell Senate Office Building, his chief of staff had walked in with 3 boxes of documents. "Sir, you asked for everything on Omar's public statements about Somalia versus America." John Kennedy looked up from the foreign aid bill he had been reading. He was 73 years old, but appeared younger, fit, and sharp. That Louisiana drawl and folksy manner made people underestimate him constantly. They always regretted it. His resume told a different story. Vanderbilt undergraduate, University of Virginia Law School, then a year at Oxford. He had practiced law for 20 years and served as Louisiana State Treasurer before winning his Senate seat. He was not what he seemed. He never had been. "What did you find?" Kennedy asked. His chief of staff started pulling out transcripts, videos, and audio files. "It is a pattern. She consistently identifies as Somali first, American second, or not at all. She refers to Somalia as home in the present tense. She calls Somalis our people. When she talks about Somali Americans, she says we and us. When she talks about Americans generally, she says they and them." Kennedy started reading through the transcripts. Within 10 minutes, he was taking notes. A speech at a Minneapolis community center in 2019. "Our homeland is under attack by American drones. Our people are being killed." A fundraiser for Somali famine relief in 2021. "We must help our brothers and sisters back home. Our people are suffering." A University of Minnesota speech in 2023. "Somalia is in our blood, in our hearts. We can never forget where we come from." An interview with Somali language media in 2024. "I will always fight for our people in Somalia. That is my duty." Kennedy looked up. How many times does she refer to Somalia as home or homeland? His chief of staff flipped through his notes. 43 documented instances in the past 5 years. Present tense. Not where I am from or where I was born, but home, as in current home. And America? She calls it this country or the United States. Never. Home. Never my country. Always. This country. As if she is a visitor. Kennedy was quiet for a long moment. Pull her voting record. Every vote related to Somalia. Foreign aid, sanctions, military operations, everything. They spent 2 weeks on the voting record. The pattern was perfect. 100%. Every single vote Omar had cast sided with Somali government interests over stated U.S. policy. A bill to sanction Somali officials with ties to al-Shabaab? She voted no. An amendment to add oversight to foreign aid for Somalia? She voted no. A resolution condemning Somali government human rights abuses? She voted present. 12 votes over 5 years. 12 times she had voted against American interests and in favor of Somalia. But that wasn't even the most damning part. Kennedy's team cross-referenced the votes with her calendar. Every single vote happened within 2 weeks of her meeting with Somali government officials. It is a pattern, Kennedy told his team. Classified briefing about Somalia, meeting with Somali officials, vote favoring Somali government interests, 17 times in 5 years. That is not a coincidence. His chief of staff looked worried. If you are suggesting she is sharing classified information, I am not suggesting anything. I am going to ask her questions and let her answers speak for themselves. They spent another 2 weeks on the financial trail, campaign contributions from Somali government-funded organizations, her husband's consulting company receiving payments from Somali business interests, speaking fees from groups connected to the Somali government. All legal, technically, all disclosed eventually, but the pattern was clear. By the time they were done, Kennedy had a binder, 50 pages, every statement where she called Somalia home, every vote favoring Somalia over America, every meeting with Somali officials, every dollar from Somali-connected sources, all cross-referenced, all documented, all public record. He was not going to accuse her of being a spy or a traitor. He was going to ask her which country she served, and he was going to let her answer or her refusal to answer tell the story. Now, at 10 a.m., on February 3rd, the hearing was called to order. The chairman brought the room to silence. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing on compliance with the Foreign Agents Registration Act and Congressional Ethics will now come to order. Opening statements were predictable. Democrats defended Omar, calling the hearing a partisan witch hunt, invoking her immigrant story and her history of being attacked. Republicans called for accountability, talking about national security and questioning her loyalty. It was standard partisan theater that would convince nobody and change nothing. Then, it was Kennedy's turn. He stood slowly, arranged his papers, and took a sip of water. The slowness was intentional. It built tension, made people wait and wonder. Congresswoman Omar, thank you for being here today. His voice was gentle, conversational. I know you did not want to come. Nobody likes being subpoenaed, but I appreciate your cooperation with this committee's oversight responsibilities. Omar nodded curtly, waiting for the attack. I want to start by acknowledging your remarkable personal story. Coming to America as a young refugee, spending years in a camp, learning a new language, a new culture, becoming a citizen, getting elected to Congress. That is extraordinary. That is the American dream. Omar's expression softened slightly. Where was he going with this? And I mean that sincerely, Kennedy continued. I believe in immigration. When people come here legally, work hard, embrace American values, and become Americans, that is what makes this country special. That is what has always made us special. He paused. Which is why I want to understand something that has been troubling me. When you became a U.S. citizen, you took an oath. Do you remember that oath? Yes, Senator. Can you recite any of it for the committee? Omar paused, not expecting this question. I swore allegiance to the United States and to uphold the Constitution. You did more than that, ma'am. The oath of citizenship is very specific. You swore that you absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty. That means you specifically renounced allegiance to Somalia. Do you remember that part? Yes, but. And then, when you were elected to Congress, you took another oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. You remember that one too, correct? Of course. Kennedy sat down and looked at her over his reading glasses. Good, because I want to talk about those oaths today. I want to understand if you have honored them, and I think the American people deserve to understand that too. The temperature in the room changed. This was not going to be about policy disagreements or political philosophy. This was going to be about loyalty. Omar's lead lawyer leaned over and whispered something. She shook her head slightly. She had handled hostile questioning before. She could handle this. Kennedy pulled out a folder. Let me start with some basic factual questions. Have you ever met with officials from the Somali government? I meet with many foreign officials as part of my congressional duties on the Foreign Affairs Committee. That is not what I asked, ma'am. Have you met specifically with officials from the Somali government? How many times in the past 5 years? She glanced at her lawyers. One of them started to speak, but Kennedy held up a hand. I would like the Congresswoman to answer, please. Omar looked back at Kennedy. I do not have an exact count. I do. 47 times. 47 documented meetings with Somali government officials, including multiple meetings with the Somali ambassador to the United States, 3 meetings with the Somali foreign minister, and 2 meetings with the prime minister. Does that sound accurate? If that is what the records show, then it is what they show. Now, did you register those meetings under the Foreign Agents Registration Act? A long pause ensued. Her lawyers were whispering urgently. Congresswoman? Kennedy prompted. Her lawyers spoke up. The Congresswoman's meetings were part of her official congressional duties, and therefore do not require FARA registration. Counselor, with respect, I asked the Congresswoman, Ma'am, did you register under FARA? No, because I was not acting as a foreign agent. I was conducting normal diplomatic. We will come back to whether they were normal or not. For now, I just want to establish the facts. 47 meetings with Somali government officials over 5 years. No FARA registration. Is that correct? Thank you for your honesty. Kennedy made a note. We will discuss what those meetings were about in a moment. But first, I want to talk about how you describe your relationship with Somalia. Kennedy pulled out a tablet and adjusted his reading glasses. Congresswoman, in 2019 you gave a speech at a Somali American community event in Minneapolis. You were discussing U.S. drone strikes in Somalia. According to the transcript, you said, and I am reading your exact words, our homeland is under attack. Our people are being killed by American drones. Do you remember saying that? Omar's voice was careful. I was expressing concern about civilian casualties in Somalia. I understand the concern. Civilian casualties are tragic, but I am asking about your specific language. You said our homeland. You didn't say the Somali homeland or their homeland. You said our homeland, meaning your homeland is Somalia. Your homeland. I was born there, but you are an American citizen now, ma'am. You have lived in the United States for over 20 years. You are a member of the United States Congress. You represent Americans. When you say, our homeland about Somalia, who is the our? Who are you including yourself with? Omar shifted in her seat. Senator, I can have pride in my heritage without. Of course you can. Nobody is questioning your right to be proud of where you came from. But there is a difference between heritage and allegiance. So let me ask again. When you said our homeland, were you referring to Somalia as your homeland? I consider myself Somali American. That is a dodge, ma'am. You can be ethnically Somali and culturally American, but you can only have one homeland in terms of political allegiance, the country you owe loyalty to. So, which is it? Is Somalia your homeland? Or is America your homeland? No clear answer came. Kennedy didn't press. He just moved on. Let me show you another example. In 2021, you spoke at a fundraiser in Minneapolis for Somali famine relief, a noble cause. But listen to what you said. He tapped his tablet, and audio played through the room's speakers. Omar's voice was unmistakable. Our people back home are suffering. The drought has devastated our communities. We must do everything we can to help our brothers and sisters in Somalia. They are our family. We cannot abandon them. Kennedy paused the audio. You said our people back home, not the people of Somalia, not Somalis who are suffering. You said our people back home. Back home, like Somalia is still home and you are just temporarily away. Is that how you see it? That is twisting my words. I am playing your exact words, ma'am. Audio recording, no twisting involved. You said, back home about Somalia, in the present tense, like it is still your home. Is it? Omar's lawyer jumped in. Senator, the Congresswoman was speaking to a Somali-American audience in a cultural context. Kennedy turned to the lawyer. Counselor, if I went to a gathering of Irish Americans and referred to Ireland as back home, people would rightly question whether my loyalty was to America or Ireland. The cultural context does not change the meaning of the words. She said, Somalia is back home. I am asking if that is what she believes. He turned back to Omar. And it is not just once or twice. My staff has documented 43 instances over the past 5 years where you have referred to Somalia as home, homeland, or back home in the present tense. 43 times. Would you like me to play more recordings? That is not necessary. Good. Then let me ask you this. In those same 5 years, how many times have you referred to America as home or my homeland? Silence. The answer is 0, ma'am. Not once. You call it this country or the United States. Always at a distance, like you are describing a place you live but do not belong to. Why is that? Omar had no answer that wouldn't make things worse. Kennedy pulled out a chart. Let's talk about your voting record in Congress, specifically votes related to Somalia. He held up the chart so the cameras could see it. In the past 5 years, there have been 12 bills, amendments, or resolutions in the House of Representatives that directly related to Somalia. Sanctions on government officials, conditions on foreign aid, oversight measures, resolutions condemning human rights abuses, 12 separate votes. Do you know how you voted on those 12 votes? Omar did not answer. You voted in favor of Somali government interests and against stated U.S. policy positions all 12 times. 100%. Let me give you some specific examples. Kennedy flipped to a page in his binder. In 2021, there was a bill to impose targeted sanctions on 15 Somali government officials and military officers who had documented ties to al-Shabaab, the terrorist organization that has killed American soldiers, aid workers, and journalists. The bill was very specific. 15 named individuals. It passed the House 391 to 4. You were one of the 4 who voted no. Why did you vote to protect Somali officials who work with terrorists? The bill was overly broad and would have hurt innocent. Ma'am, I just told you it named 15 specific individuals. How is that overly broad? Sanctions regimes often have unintended consequences. These were targeted sanctions, asset freezes, and travel bans for 15 men who were proven to be working with a designated terrorist organization. And you voted no. The only explanation that makes sense is that you were protecting the Somali government's interests over America's security interests. Is there another explanation? Omar's jaw was tight. I voted my conscience based on my understanding of the region. Let me give you another example. 2022. There was an amendment to add accountability measures to $400 million in U.S. foreign aid to Somalia. The amendment required the Somali government to provide quarterly reports showing the aid was not being stolen or diverted to militants. Basic oversight. The amendment passed 357 to 18. You voted no. Why vote against transparency? The conditions were punitive and undermined. They were accountability measures to ensure American taxpayer dollars were not stolen. But you opposed them. Why? No good answer. Kennedy leaned forward. And here is what is interesting, Congresswoman. Every single one of these 12 votes happened within 2 weeks of you meeting with Somali government officials. Every single one. The pattern is perfect. He pulled out another document. Let me show you. August 2021. You meet with the Somali ambassador. 2 weeks later, you vote against sanctions. March 2022. Meeting with the foreign minister. 1 week later, you vote against the oversight amendment. September 2023. Meeting with the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. 10 days later, you vote against a resolution condemning Somali government human rights abuses. Kennedy looked up from the document. 17 times in 5 years. You met with Somali government officials and then voted in their favor within 2 weeks. That is not coincidence, ma'am. That is coordination. That is correlation, not causation. It is a pattern. And it raises the obvious question. Were you voting based on your own judgment of what is best for America? Or were you voting based on what Somali government officials asked you to vote for? Let's talk about your finances, Kennedy said, pulling out FEC reports. Your campaign and your family's business interests. He opened one of the reports. In the 2022 election cycle, your campaign received $847,000 from an organization called the Somali American Leadership Council. That is a substantial amount from one source. What is the Somali American Leadership Council? It is a community organization that supports Somali American candidates and causes. It is a lobbying organization, ma'am. And according to its tax filings, it is funded primarily by Somali business interests, many of which have direct ties to the Somali government. You received nearly $850,000 from a foreign government-connected organization. Did you disclose that to your constituents? Her lawyer interjected. The contributions were legal and properly disclosed to the FEC. I did not ask if they were legal. I asked if she disclosed to voters that she was taking money from foreign government-connected sources, because voters have a right to know when their congresswoman is funded by a foreign government. Kennedy pulled out another document. Your husband's consulting firm, the E Street Group. According to public records, it received $280,000 in payments from Somali business interests in 2023. That is triple what the company made the year before. What services did his firm provide to justify that payment? My husband's business is separate from my congressional work, but you live in the same house. You share finances. You file joint tax returns, and his income tripled the year after you started taking regular meetings with Somali government officials. You do not see a connection? Omar's face was flushed. That is innuendo. It is documented fact. Here is another fact. You have done 6 paid speaking events in the past 2 years. Total compensation, $340,000. 5 of those 6 events were sponsored by organizations with direct financial ties to the Somali government. You are being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars by Somali government-connected sources while voting in favor of Somali government interests. That is not public service, ma'am. That is a conflict of interest. Kennedy's voice got quieter, more serious. Congresswoman, you serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. That gives you access to classified intelligence briefings. Is that correct? Including classified briefings specifically about Somalia, about terrorist threats, military operations, intelligence assessments, correct? I cannot discuss classified information in this setting. I am not asking you to reveal classified information. I am asking if you receive classified briefings about Somalia. Yes or no? And after receiving those classified briefings, have you met with or communicated with Somali government officials? A long, dangerous pause. I engage in routine diplomatic conversations as part of my committee work. That is not what I asked. After receiving classified briefings about Somalia, have you met with or contacted Somali government officials? Her lawyers were whispering urgently. This was treacherous ground. I may have had conversations. I may have. Kennedy pulled out phone records. These are call logs obtained through FOIA requests. Public record. Let me read you a timeline. August 12th, 2023. You attended a closed-door classified briefing on al-Shabaab activity in southern Somalia. That evening at 7:43 p.m., you placed a 40-minute phone call to the Somali ambassador. What did you discuss in that call? I do not recall the specific. September 3rd, 2023. Another classified briefing. This one about U.S. military operations planning in the region. That same night, you had a 35-minute call with an official at the Somali Foreign Ministry. What did you discuss? General diplomatic matters. Ma'am, this is a pattern. 17 times in 3 years, you have attended classified briefings about Somalia and within 48 hours contacted Somali government officials. At minimum, that shows terrible judgment. At worst, it is espionage. The word hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't detonated yet. I have never, ever compromised classified information. I want to believe that I really do. But the pattern is undeniable. You receive sensitive intelligence about Somalia. You immediately contact Somali officials. Then you vote in ways that benefit the Somali government. If you are not sharing classified information, you are at least sharing insights and policy direction that Somalia should not have access to. Either way, you are serving their interests, not ours. Kennedy looked at the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to call a witness if the committee permits. The chairman, caught off guard, nodded. Proceed. We have a member of the Somali American community here who requested the opportunity to address these issues. Her name is Amina Hassan. She is a constituent of Congresswoman Omar's district. From the audience, a woman in her mid-40s stood. She wore a black hijab and a professional gray suit. She walked to the microphone that had been set up for audience questions. Thank you, Senator Kennedy. And thank you, Congresswoman Omar, for your time. Omar looked wary. Amina Hassan's voice was clear and strong. Congresswoman, I voted for you in 2016, and in 2018. I was proud, so proud, to see a Somali woman in Congress. I thought you would represent us. Represent Somali Americans who chose this country, who love this country. She paused. But I am here today because you do not represent me. You do not represent our community, and I want you to know that. Omar's expression hardened. My family fled Somalia in 1993, Amina continued. During the Civil War, my father was killed by militias, fighting over Mogadishu. We spent 3 years in a refugee camp in Kenya. When we finally came to America, my mother cried. She said we were finally safe, finally home. Her voice got stronger. We became citizens in 2001. I remember the ceremony. I was 16 years old. When we took the oath renouncing allegiance to Somalia, My mother squeezed my hand. She whispered, "We are Americans now." And she meant it. We all meant it. Amina looked directly at Omar. Somalia failed us. The government there is corrupt, violent, controlled by warlords and terrorists. We came to America because we chose America. We love this country. When people ask me where I am from, I say, Minnesota. When they ask about my heritage, I say, I am Somali American. But when they ask where home is, I say, America. Without hesitation, without qualification. America is home. She paused. But you keep calling Somalia home. You keep taking money from the Somali government. You keep voting to protect their interests, even when it hurts America. You are not representing Somali Americans. You are representing the Somali government, and we are tired of you claiming to speak for us. The room was silent. Omar had no response. What could she say? Amina sat down. Kennedy nodded to her. Thank you, ma'am. Congresswoman Omar? Would you like to respond? Omar looked at Amina, then at Kennedy. I respect her perspective, but I do not think. Do you disagree with anything she said? I think my record speaks for itself. It does. That is the problem. Kennedy gathered his papers, organizing them. The slowness was deliberate, building to something. Congresswoman, we have established several things today. You consistently refer to Somalia as home or homeland. In the present tense, 43 documented instances. You have voted in favor of Somali government interests over American interests 12 out of 12 times. 100%. You have received hundreds of thousands of dollars from Somali government-connected sources. You have attended classified briefings and immediately contacted Somali officials 17 times. And you have just heard from one of your own constituents, a Somali-American refugee like you, saying, "You don't represent the community. You represent a foreign government." He looked up at her. So, I want to ask you a question, and I want you to answer it honestly, because I believe the American people deserve an honest answer. The room was completely silent. Everyone knew something big was coming. Kennedy leaned forward slightly. If the United States and Somalia went to war tomorrow, hypothetically, an armed conflict between the two nations, which side would you want to win? 10 seconds of silence. 15. 20. The longest silence anyone could remember in a congressional hearing. Omar's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at her lawyers. They were staring at the table, unable to help. This was a question only she could answer. That is a ridiculous hypothetical. It is not ridiculous, ma'am. It is the most basic question of loyalty imaginable. Two countries in conflict. Which side would you want to prevail? Every American should be able to answer that in 1 second. Which side would you want to win? I refuse to engage with Islamophobic questions designed to question my loyalty. Kennedy's voice remained calm, patient. I have not mentioned your religion once today, not once in 2 hours of questioning. I have asked about your allegiance to countries, not your faith. This is not about Islam. This is about whether you are serving American interests or Somali interests, America or Somalia. Which one would you want to win? More silence. 30 seconds now. Omar was trapped, and everyone could see it. From the audience, Amina Hassan stood up again. Just say America, Ilhan. Why can't you just say America? Omar turned to look at her, shock and anger on her face. Amina's voice was louder now. My family chose this country. We took the oath, and we meant it. We said goodbye to Somalia and hello to America. It is not complicated. It is not a trick question. America is our home. Just say it. Another Somali-American man stood in the audience. We can say it. Why can't you? A woman with a hijab stood. "You are making us all look bad. You are making people think we can't be loyal Americans." Omar stood suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. "I am not going to participate in this racist circus designed to make Muslims prove their loyalty." Kennedy's voice cut through, still calm. "Ma'am, you are still under oath. You cannot simply leave. Watch me." She was gathering her papers with shaking hands. "Congresswoman, if you walk out of this hearing without answering that question, everyone watching, and millions are watching, will know exactly what your silence means. Your refusal to answer is an answer." She stopped, turned to face him. Her voice was shaking with anger. "My answer is that I do not owe you or anyone else proof of my loyalty to this country. I took the oath of citizenship. I took the oath of office. That should be enough." Kennedy shook his head slowly. "The oath of citizenship requires you to renounce allegiance to all foreign countries. But you have not renounced allegiance to Somalia. You call it home. You vote for its interests. You take its money. You meet with its officials after classified briefings. The oath is not enough if you do not honor it. I am done with this hearing." Omar grabbed her briefcase. "Ma'am, I said I am done." She walked toward the exit, her lawyers scrambling to follow. The cameras captured everything. Her angry face, her shaking hands, the way she wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. At the door, she stopped and turned back one last time. "You want to know which side I choose? I choose peace. I choose diplomacy. I choose not engaging with your false binaries and warmongering hypotheticals." Kennedy's response was quiet but devastating. "Ma'am, every American soldier, every diplomat, every citizen can say they choose America if forced to choose. Your inability to say the same thing tells us everything we need to know about where your allegiance lies." Ilhan Omar pushed through the door and was gone. The hearing room erupted, senators shouting, reporters yelling questions, cameras flashing. But through it all, Kennedy sat calmly at his desk, organizing his papers like he had just finished a routine committee meeting. The clips were everywhere within minutes. Not the full 2-hour hearing, but 30-second segments, the moments that mattered. "Our homeland is under attack." Kennedy asking, "Which homeland?" "Our people back home." Kennedy asking, "Back home where? Which side would you want to win?" 15 seconds of silence. "Just say America." The Somali American constituent pleading. Omar walking out without answering. Within 2 hours, number which side was trending nationwide. Within 4 hours, it had been tweeted 5 million times. Within 12 hours, every major news outlet had led with the story. And this time, it wasn't just conservative media attacking her. Even liberal outlets were uncomfortable with her refusal to answer. CNN's panel that night. "Look, I understand not wanting to engage with hypotheticals, but it is a simple question of loyalty. Every American should be able to say they would choose America." MSNBC's legal analyst, "Her silence on that question is going to haunt her, because silence is an answer." The New York Times editorial board. Representative Omar's troubling non-answer. But the most devastating response came from within her own community. Friday morning, the Twin Cities Somali Coalition, the largest Somali-American organization in Minnesota, released a statement. "We came to America by choice. We fled Somalia because it failed us, because the government there could not protect us, because we wanted a better life. When we became Americans, we meant it. We chose America. We expect our elected representatives to do the same." Congresswoman Omar's refusal to clearly state her allegiance to America is troubling and does not reflect our community's values. By Friday afternoon, 15 prominent Somali-American imams in Minnesota had signed an open letter. "We love this country. We are grateful for the opportunities America has given us and our children. We are proud Americans who happen to be of Somali heritage. We wish Congresswoman Omar would clearly and proudly state the same. The political consequences came fast. Saturday, the Justice Department announced it was opening an investigation into potential FARA violations, based on the testimony and documents from the hearing. Sunday, the House Ethics Committee announced its own investigation into Omar's financial relationships with Somali government-connected entities. Monday, polling showed the damage. 68% of Americans, including 43% of Democrats, believed Omar should have answered Kennedy's question. 71% believed her refusal to answer indicated divided loyalty. 54% believed she should resign from Congress. In her own district, her approval rating dropped 19 points in 72 hours. Tuesday, Don Samuels, the moderate Democrat who had nearly beaten Omar in the 2022 primary, announced he would challenge her again in 2026. His announcement speech was brief. "I love this country without qualification. I love it with my whole heart. I can say without hesitation that if forced to choose between America and any other nation on earth, I choose America every time, without question." Apparently, our current representative cannot say the same. That is disqualifying. The first poll after his announcement showed him leading Omar by 12 points. Wednesday, 3 members of the squad AOC, Rashida, and Ayanna Pressley, released a joint statement. It was carefully worded. "We support Representative Omar's right to push back against Islamophobic questioning. We also believe that all Americans, regardless of heritage, can clearly state their loyalty to this country." Translation: We are not defending her silence. Ilhan Omar's office released multiple statements over the next week. Each one tried to explain, contextualize, and justify. None of them included the words, "I would want America to win." That was the problem. In all the statements, all the interviews, all the tweets, she never actually answered the question. And everyone noticed. John Kennedy gave one interview about the hearing to a reporter from the Baton Rouge Advocate, his local paper, not national media. "Do you think you were fair to her?" the reporter asked. Kennedy was quiet for a moment. "I asked her which country she would choose. Every American should be able to answer that instantly. Every naturalized citizen took an oath, specifically renouncing allegiance to other countries so they could answer that question clearly. Her silence was not my doing. I just asked the question she should have been able to answer easily. If her loyalty was clear, some say it was a gotcha question. It is only a gotcha if you cannot answer honestly. If you are genuinely loyal to America, you say, 'America,' without thinking. The fact that she had to think about it, that she could not bring herself to say it, that tells you everything." 6 months later, Ilhan Omar lost her primary. Not by a little, by 18 points. It was the largest margin of defeat for an incumbent member of Congress in Minnesota history. Her concession speech was brief. She talked about fighting Islamophobia, about standing up for her community, about not backing down from attacks. She never mentioned the question, never addressed why she couldn't answer it. Maybe because there was no good answer. Either she would have chosen Somalia, which would end her career, or she would have chosen America, which would contradict everything she had said and done for years. Or she could refuse to answer, which is what she did, and which ended her career anyway. In the end, it wasn't John Kennedy who destroyed Ilhan Omar's political future. It was a simple question. 6 words. Which side would you choose? And her inability to say America. Because if you cannot say you would choose America, if you represent America in Congress, and you cannot say you would choose America over the country you fled as a refugee, then what are you doing there? The lesson, if there was one, was this: you can be proud of your heritage. You can love the culture you came from. You can maintain connections to the place you were born. But if you are going to serve in the United States Congress, you need to be able to say, clearly and without hesitation, that your allegiance is to the United States, not to any other country, not to two countries, just one. It is the most basic requirement of public service in America. And Ilhan Omar could not meet it. Her silence said everything.